I just don't see why there can't be like the surprise twist ending at the end of every mystery book saying, oh no, they were twins. It was twins all along. I love that twist. Has it been overdone? Probably. But I think it's been underdone in recent years, so it should be brought back. Hi, I'm Anne. Welcome back to my channel, and it is Tag Tuesday, so thus I am doing a tag, and today I'm going to be doing the Think Twice book tag. This was created by AJ Dunn, Reads and Writes, and Bookworm Adventure Girl. I will link both their channels down in the description. They're original videos. I was tagged by AJ Dunn himself, and I read this and I thought this is such a fun tag, and I haven't done a tag in a few weeks. I feel like it's about time that I should do a tag. So let's just jump into the prompts without further ado. So the first one is Double Vision, a book that features twins, and I had the hardest time with this question. You would think that this would be a relatively easy question because there are quite a lot of twins in fiction, but then I thought of Harry Potter and I was like, oh, George and Fred Weasley. Okay, you know what? It's probably an obvious answer, but for some reason I couldn't think of any other books that had twins in them. The second one is Double Talk, a book with two or twice in the title, and this was easy because I pulled out The Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. It has the most epic opening line. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It's a great book. Highly recommend it, and it also has two in the title. The next one is Seeing Double, a book with a reflection, shadow, or mirror images on the cover. For that, I'm going to go with A Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. I don't know what about this picture is just kind of disorienting because the figures are very blurred. There's a lot of shadows around them. It's almost like they're mirror images of each other. They are part of this dystopian world. It's a really good book, and I think this cover really encapsulates what this book is trying to do. So yeah, I don't know, not exactly shadows and mirrors and reflections, but it kind of combines all the stuff. So I thought it was fitting. The next one is Takes two book covers that look similar but are by different authors. I don't know why, but I pulled out these two, which is A Man Called Uwe and Lady Clementine. One is by Friedrich Bachmann, a Swedish author, and one is by Marie Benedict. Both have kind of big font. Both have a singular figure staring away from the cover. In one case, it's an old man. In the other case, it is Clementine Churchill, the wife of Winston Churchill. So they're different enough. Like this one's very blue, this one's very yellow and a little bit of, I guess, purple. But for the most part, just the stark impression of them looking away from the camera and facing away, to me, reminds me of each of these books, even though these books are vastly different. The next one is I Second That, a retelling. So I've talked about a few retellings on my channel, so I wanted to pick out one, especially one that I really enjoyed from my childhood that I haven't talked about yet. And so I'm going to pick The Goose Girl by Sharon Hale. This is a retelling of the fairy tale The Goose Girl, and I loved this book. I didn't read this till I was older, and I wish I had read it when I was like 12 or something, because I think I would have even loved it more. But it's a fun retelling of the fairy tale with adding a lot of interest and depth to a lot of the characters, especially the main character. The next one is Two Can Play That Game, a character who plays two roles or has an alter ego. For this I picked, and technically this would fit for several of the prompts, but I wanted to pick a different book for each prompt, When the Day Comes by Gabrielle Meyer. And this one not only has the mirror images, so I could have picked it for an earlier prompt, but it also has this one character living between two different timelines. So it also is set in two different timelines, which we'll get down to later on as a later prompt. This one I thought was more fitting to be the two roles or two alter egos, because she very much has two very different lives in both these worlds. It's a very good book. I highly recommend it. It's a Christian historical novel about this woman who travels back and forth. Every single day she wakes up in a different time period between 1914, 1917, and colonial Williamsburg. The next one is It Takes Two, a duology. I don't read many duologies. I realize that either I read standalone books, which is what I predominantly read, or I read very long series. But the one that did come to mind was The Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. My husband convinced me to read this because he quite loved it, and I really enjoyed this duology. Did not like Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo as well, but this one was really good. I enjoyed the characters. The Crooked Kingdom, which is the second The second book in the series I didn't like quite as much, but I think Six of Crows I gave like 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. It was a really good book. This one I think I gave 3 out of 5 stars, maybe 4 stars. But it's a very good duology. The next one is On the Double, a book told in 2 timelines. So this is kind of cheating answer, but I'm going to pick Kokoro by Natsuma Soseki. So basically it tells the story of this young man who befriends this older man in Japan, and I believe one of the periods in time is set in like the 1920s, and then it is also we hear the story of the older man when he was younger back in like 19 teens, maybe it's set 19 teens versus 1930s. I can't quite remember when it is set, but so it is a very vastly different time in Japanese history because there were a lot of changes that were happening in the late 19th century into the 20th century in Japan. So the 2 timelines very much vastly contrast the societal changes that happened in just like 20 or 30 years. Really interesting book. I highly recommend it. Not exactly a dual timeline, but you do learn both of their stories in different timelines. The next one is A Perfect Pair. The last 2 books you gave 5 stars to. I had to check this because I did not remember anything, but I found out the most recent one I gave 5 stars to is Houseplant Oasis, a guide to caring for your plants and styling them in your home by Melissa Lowe. I won this in a Goodreads giveaway, and I read this earlier this month. I think this was the first book that I finished this month, and I absolutely adored it. Not only is it just visually stunning to look at, but it also has a lot of useful information for people like me who live in like apartments and small houses and want to have houseplants but don't really know quite where to start. It talks about different soil, different types of plants, sunlight, watering, things like that. I really enjoyed this book, and it's a beautifully aesthetic book outside of just also being very useful. And the other one I most recently gave 5 stars to was last month, and that was The Hunger of the Gods by John Gwynne. I gave that 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. It's a Viking fantasy, kind of. Very, very good book. The next one is Two for the Show, a book which has been adapted to film 2 or more times. And I'm going to go with an obvious answer, and that's Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Pride and Prejudice has been adapted a lot more than 2 times. In fact, I recently watched like most of the adaptations in Jane Austen July. There's like an Italian one from the 50s or 60s, and what was the other country I watched it from? I don't know, 2 foreign ones, and then of course there's a lot of the famous ones, the 2005 version, the 1995 version. They made one for BBC in the 1980s. There was one in the 1940s starring Laurence Olivier and Greer Garson. So there's a lot of adaptations of Pride and Prejudice, a lot more than 2. The next one is Two's Company, a book with 2 or more authors or a translated fiction book. I could technically choose a lot of translated fiction, but I went with The Explorers Guild. Volume 1, A Passage to Shambhala. I've talked about this enough on my channel. This is by 2 authors, John Bard and Kevin Costner. Yes, the actor Kevin Costner. A couple people asked me that in the last video I mentioned this book. Yes, it is the actor Kevin Costner. And the final one is Double Take. Recommend 2 books you think would pair well together and tell us why. And this is actually something I referenced in my Moby Dick review, that these books were quite similar, and I was surprised at their similarities. Even though the authors are kind of contemporaries of each other, one is American, one is French. You know who I'm talking about. It's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne and Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Both of these are seafaring voyage adventures, but both of them very much focus on the science and the elements of the sea. Jules Verne gets very much into the technology of submarines, as well as the fish living under the sea and the apparatus used to dive. This one talks about the history of whaling, the societal ideas of whaling, as well as whales and the scientific stuff about them. So both these on the surface, you wouldn't think they're that similar. And yet when I was reading this one, I was reminded frequently of this one. So these are surprisingly similar, even though a lot of people, I've never heard the comparison between Jules Verne and Herman Melville. So who am I going to tag? I'm going to tag only 2 people because 1, I don't usually tag people, and and I don't want to like accidentally double tag people, so I'm pretty sure these two have not been tagged. And also I feel like it's fitting to tag two people because, you know, the tag is all about twos. So I'm gonna tag Jane from Lady Jane Brooks. I tag her quite a lot. I'm sorry if you don't want to do this, Jane, that's totally fine. And then I'm going to also tag Miriam from Miriam Elizabeth Reads. I've been watching her recently and I've been really enjoying her channel. It's very good. So I'll link both their channels down in the description. What are some of your answers to these prompts? Have you read any of these books? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, like, subscribe. I post every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!